Dallas, Texas, 1983. A 54-year-old engineer named Morris Chang sits in a top-floor boardroom of American manufacturer Texas Instruments, waiting for a promotion that he's chased for 25 years. Instead, he's ambushed. A group of younger executives surround him and say that he's too old, too Asian, and too small-minded to lead an American tech giant. They tell him, "You will never be our CEO." Morris is devastated, but doesn't let it show. Instead, he smiles, thanks them for their time, and walks out the door, deciding in that moment to build his own future. One centered around a bold new plan. Build a factory so good that every other company in the world will beg to use it. But little does he know that this simple idea will turn his tiny island into home for the most powerful company in the world, while putting him, his country, and the rest of the world in incredible danger. Morris Chang lands in Taipei, Taiwan on a humid spring night in 1985. At 55 years old, he's starting over in a country that he's not called home since childhood. His reason for the move? To help his homeland with an impossible task. Taiwan's leaders dream of turning their rice fields into the most advanced factories in the world, but they have no blueprint and little time. America's big chip firms already own the business. A rattling taxi carries Morris south to Hinshu Science Park, his new home. Chang looks up to see a half-built building standing in front of him, knowing the challenge ahead. As he walks through the empty concrete halls of what will become his new business empire, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC for short, power blinks twice, and rain blows through missing windows. Yet Morris vows to turn this half-finished mess into an elite chip factory. He knows he needs to make this work. His reputation and life's work are on the line. Taiwanese government has already signed a $50 million loan to make this project a reality, so Morris can build the most advanced computer chips designed by other tech companies that no one else can. But the deal is harsh for TSMC. Bring in foreign clients within 3 years or pay all the money back with interest. As Morris shuffled through papers in his folder, he notices some used tools starting to arrive from the United States and dented crates marked fragile. Workers begin hanging plastic sheets and bolting air filters to the ceilings, hoping to turn their ordinary building into a makeshift clean room that will protect their extremely valuable computer chip parts from dust. But things start out much rougher than expected for Morris Chang. Only one company places a tiny order his first year in business, as employees joke behind his back that they're building cathedrals for ghosts. During TSMC's first trial runs, only 2% of chips actually work, with most of them coming out of the factory only to be thrown in the trash. And just when they needed to catch a break the most, the island itself strikes down TSMC. A massive storm tears down power lines, the clean room goes dark, and 30,000 half-built computer chips spoil in the muggy air. This damage put them months even further behind. Morris sinks to his knees in the only dry spot in his office, leaning on a pallet of ruined components, and for the first time, allowing himself to silently question, "Can I really save this?" As he walks out of his office, the staff brace for shouting. But Chang remains calm. This isn't the first time that he's faced devastating loss and delays, because Morris Chang was never supposed to make it this far in the first place. Born in 1931 in a war-torn China, he dodged bombs and border guards, studied by candlelight, and reached America on scholarship to Harvard University and then MIT, all with just a few dollars in his pockets in order to find a better life, which he quickly created for himself by pursuing his passion for engineering, going on to build a 25-year career at Texas Instruments by solving factory problems no one else could, right up until the day that the company he loved told him that he'd never be their leader as they forced him out. So as Morris looked around at the destruction, he knew there was no option for failure. TSMC was his last shot at building the company he always dreamed of. So Chang goes into his office and tapes a sign on the door. Learn and think. Every failure is a clue. The computer chip graveyard of failed builds turns into a classroom. The crew keeps a notebook on every single mistake and each speck of dust, making sure not to make the same error twice. And within 5 years, all that painstaking work at TSMC started to pay off. They can now cut down defects to 3 out of every billion chips made, with factories cleaner than most operating rooms. Word travels fast as Morris Chang starts to build up more and more customers. Then, in 1997, a young startup company named NVIDIA asked Morris to build their first gaming graphics chips, only to be followed by Qualcomm closing a deal to have TSMC build its chips for its new 3G flip phones. And by the mid-2000s, video game chips, internet modems, and even NASA sensors were all being made in TSMC factories. With every new order, no one realizes that TSMC is quietly turning into the one company that could stop the world in its tracks just a few decades later. But there was a grave danger looming on the horizon for TSMC. He just didn't know it yet. One that would force Morris Chang into the biggest gamble of his career and either secure TSMC's future or bankrupt it completely. The year is 2008. Wall Street is melting, and most chip makers are slamming the brakes on all research and development. But TSMC does just the opposite. Morris Chang walks into a boardroom and writes a single number on the whiteboard: $9 billion. The room is silent. His colleagues look at each other with shock. Morris wants the money to build a chip more advanced than the world has ever seen before, with circuit wires almost 3,000 times thinner than a human hair. But the tools to make these chips do not exist yet, and the global economy looks like it might fall apart tomorrow. So in order to build the impossible, it will cost TSMC $9 billion, more than all of their profits from the last year. The rest of the board members start to question him, but Morris simply shrugs and says,
"I heard you, but I am still the guy that's responsible for the operation of the company. So you need to let me go ahead with this one." So they were satisfied with that.
The board knows Morris has a point, so they agree, but not without hesitation, because the stakes could not be any higher. If TSMC misses the production deadline of this next generation chip by just 6 months, their company could go bankrupt. Morris orders the equipment anyway. Parts start to arrive from the Netherlands and California, but there's a problem right away. Chang's engineers discover that these brand new scanners they bought can't draw lines thin enough on the chips in order to make these new advanced designs. So they come up with a trick to solve this issue by printing the design on just half the chip, then turning it around to take care of the other side, making sure everything is lined up perfectly. Because even the smallest mistake could short circuit the whole entire chipboard. For months, only 5% of the chips are made correctly. The other 95%, expensive scrap. Investors grumble. As tech news blogs say, the project is never going to happen. But Morris can't hear any of that. Instead, he simply points to his own door sign: "Learn and think. Every failure is a clue." He doubles the team in charge of tracking defects, recruits other cleanroom experts from his competitors, and cancels holidays until success rates improve. And despite nearly losing NVIDIA as a customer in 2009, the breakthrough Morris Chang was waiting for finally happens in 2010. A single TSMC production line spits out a report on their latest batch, this time with a giant green sticker stating 50% positive results. Morris Chang immediately calls NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang, letting him know that TSMC is ready to make their new cutting-edge chips. NVIDIA, hungry for faster gaming computers, immediately signs on to a new deal for this revolutionary tech. When the shipment arrives at their offices, the boxes come with a simple sticker note stating, "Handle like newborns." But when NVIDIA starts testing out their new investment, they make a shocking discovery. TSMC's latest chips are twice as powerful as anything they had in their entire product line. Jensen Huang knew his company needed more and fast. So he placed a follow-up order big enough to fill 2 of TSMC's new factories. Many mocked Morris Chang for making a $9 billion bet during a global financial crisis, but it paid off massively. Gaming laptop sales jumped 40% during the next holiday season, mainly because of these powerful chips that TSMC made. So Morris doubles down to create even more advanced chips, buying a $120 million scanner the size of a city bus, so big that they have to cut holes in the factory walls just to set it up. But by the summer of 2011, TSMC's massive investment in these machines helped Morris Chang reach perfection. In one batch of their newest chips, TSMC turned out 4,000 perfect samples with 0 failures. A floor tech snaps a photo. Chang frames it in his office. This is proof that his tiny island can achieve the impossible. Across the world, Apple is designing a new advanced chip for its extremely popular iPhones and iPads. But Apple's new CEO, Tim Cook, doesn't want to rely on one of his biggest rivals, Samsung, to make chips for them anymore. So he asked Morris Chang to make an extremely powerful computer chip to help make Apple's next generation tech really come to life. Morris knew he had to say yes, but realized that this meant he was taking a massive risk. Because now he would be sacrificing 25% of TSMC's revenue just to be able to take on this new job for Apple. The work is intense, where engineers could often be found sleeping beside their factory machines after 18-hour shifts. But Morris Chang ships Apple's chips right on schedule. And when the new Apple Tech launches with TSMC's chips buried inside, over 500,000 units sell out in 3 days. By the end of the year, Apple and Nvidia will book up every open slot in TSMC's factories, where they're running all day and night to fill customer orders. Morris Chang's bet on himself with Apple had worked out brilliantly. His company was becoming a rising star in the tech world, as TSMC was making around 50% of the world's most advanced computer chips in 2014. And that doesn't go unnoticed. Wall Street starts taking an interest in Morris's company, with investors rushing to buy shares as TSMC's value explodes past its competitors. Morris was happy and content with the company he built. That happiness wouldn't last long, because companies are only safe until governments, rivals, and even customers decide one has too much power. And Morris Chang was about to find out the true cost of success. TSMC was growing so fast, its competition started dying out. But it didn't happen all at once. First, Intel's much-hyped next-generation chip hit yet another delay. Next, it's discovered that a TSMC competitor, Global Foundries, is burning cash on a competitive project that still won't work. One by one, the rest of the manufacturing giants around TSMC began to drop off, until the hill was strangely quiet. But as Morris Chang's company rose to the top, so did its importance to Taiwan's survival. Industry insiders began using a new term, Taiwan's silicon shield.
I've heard this expression, silicon shield, talking about your company.
Well, it means that perhaps because our company provides a lot of chips to the world, maybe somebody will refrain from attacking it.
The world was becoming dangerously dependent on one company without even realizing it. Meanwhile, back in Taiwan, TSMC's newest production lines were running 24 hours a day with 9 out of 10 chips coming out perfect, a level that others could only dream about. Everything seems to be going perfect as TSMC employees celebrate during a company party under a banner that reads 100 billion and climbing. They realize that their company is one of the most valuable in the entire world. But while everyone else is celebrating, the mood is cautious inside Morris Chang's top floor office. He circles a new number on the whiteboard, 92%, TSMC's market share of the world's cutting-edge computer chips. On paper, it was a stat all business owners only dream of, a legal monopoly that no one could compete with. But alone, staring at his whiteboard, Morris rubbed his eyes and whispered to himself, at this height, one stumble could be fatal. He realizes that TSMC now has true control over the biggest industries in the world. and he knows that too much power is dangerous. Because it won't be long before Chinese missiles are seen roaring through waters just 30 miles away from Taiwan's coast. But before Chang can even pause to consider what this level of success might mean for TSMC or for Taiwan's future, the next major problem lands on his desk. TSMC's costs are exploding. The race to make chips smaller and smaller while packing each one with even more computing power is putting a ton of pressure on his company's bottom line. Because now, the specialized tools Morris needs to print each new chip pattern are costing TSMC about $3 million a piece. But while these rising prices created a problem for Morris, he realized they were also hurting his competition much worse, making his company the world's only go-to factory. And by late 2017, with TSMC firmly in the top spot of advanced chip manufacturing, a package landed on Chang's desk with an impossible request. It was the blueprints for a chip design so complex that even Morris had to pause while looking at the specs. This was no routine ask. It was a leap into the unknown. Morris's team tore apart every rule in the book, rebuilding tools and processes on the fly. And then they delivered the first flawless run of the world's tiniest chip. Clients didn't just cheer, they scrambled to reserve every ounce of TSMC factory capacity. Apple jumped in first, booking multiple factories to make their latest iPhone chip. As an Apple manager joked later in an email, if TSMC sneezes, the iPhone catches a cold. On a whiteboard in Chang's office, a simple chart shows the story. Intel's line is flat, Global Foundries is taking a dive, and TSMC's is skyrocketing upward. But every new factory now costs $20 billion, more than an aircraft carrier. Tool prices rise as defect counts widen, which means no one else can keep up, and TSMC is left standing in a graveyard of its own competitors. But this level of victory breeds a different kind of tension, and Morris Chang begins to notice the winds are subtly changing at his company. It starts off with a curious request. TSMC's insurance companies begin to add a Taiwan surcharge on every company shipment. Officially, they claim the additional cost is due to potential risk from typhoons and power outages. But off the record, everyone knows it's all about the invasion threats from their much larger neighbor, China. Then, automakers and data center CEOs start getting called into emergency meetings, all asking the same question. What happens to our business if TSMC loses power or the ability to ship products to us for even just a week? No one had an answer. In the eyes of this brewing storm, Morris Chang quietly announces his second retirement and left his successor to run a company that was both Taiwan's greatest strength and its biggest risk. Around the world, rivals scramble to seize the opportunity. TSMC keeps moving forward like nothing changed, as their production lines continue to hum along and success rates keep improving. But the growing whispers around them are getting too loud to ignore. They say there is too much critical tech sitting on one earthquake, a storm-prone island that now has growing threats coming from its biggest neighbor. While owning a monopoly can print money, it also paints a large target on your back. And TSMC's bullseye just covered the entire map. So it was only a matter of time before someone started taking shots at it. The rules used to be simple. Whoever controls the factory calls the shots. That is, until bigger forces step in to break the rules and change the game completely. Suddenly, it wasn't engineers, investors, or even customers who held the control, but governments and politicians now deciding who got access to the most cutting-edge chips. It started in July 2018, when US government officials, fearful of China's ever-growing military advancements, announced a 25% tax, also known as a tariff, on all Chinese tech goods. China struck back that same day, charging American electronics companies a matching 25% fee for any tech coming into their country. But the real threat wasn't just higher prices. It was a clause in the US law allowing government officials to blacklist any foreign company, cutting off its access to American buyers overnight. And everyone knew which company that threat was really pointed at: TSMC. Alarm bells started ringing out across global supply chains, while panicked lobbyists raced to Washington, D.C., urging politicians to create a safety net for global trade in order to prevent destroying American companies that needed TSMC's help. Eventually, they came up with a solution. They called it the CHIPS Act, a $52 billion fund to lure factories back to American soil. The goal? Simple self-protection, by making sure American tech doesn't grind to a halt if Taiwan goes offline, while creating thousands of new jobs in the process. Reporters wonder aloud, will TSMC really share its secret sauce on its closely guarded processes in the US? The answer was clear: yes, but only because the US government was writing big checks. And so, in early 2022, a patch of desert north of Phoenix, Arizona, won a global bidding war to become the site of TSMC's first American factory. But there was one massive problem. Arizona is a desert filled with dust. And if there's one thing a chip factory doesn't like, it's dust. Summer winds whip sand straight through the construction site's open steel frame. The local foreman, face covered in dust as he's sweating through his uniform, complains, "Building a clean room in a wind tunnel? Who thought that was a good idea?" Construction schedules continue to slip repeatedly as delays keep hitting the TSMC team. Morris Chang, now an honorary advisor at TSMC, tours the Arizona shell in a hard hat. A reporter yells over the wind, "Why pick a dust bowl for the cleanest tech on earth?" Chang smiles and replies back, "Clean rooms hate dust, but the people here seem willing to learn." What he doesn't say is that no amount of government funding can replicate decades worth of Taiwanese experience and discipline. The Arizona project revealed an uncomfortable truth. Creating a backup copy of TSMC might be impossible, especially on America's timeline. But regardless, they continue forward under the night sky as the half-finished factory glows with temporary work lights. Inside, a banner is being printed out that reads Morris Chang's famous line, "Learn and think. Every failure is a clue." However, the crew never even bothers to hang it up. They're too busy wiping surfaces that will never be clean enough. But while TSMC wrestled with dust and delays in Arizona, engineers in China quietly dropped a bombshell on the rest of the tech world. A new phone powered by an extremely advanced homegrown computer chip that no one thought they could make. And with China suddenly feeling less dependent on TSMC, it wouldn't be long before Taiwan's radar screens soon lit up with warplanes and missiles landing just off their shores. An engineer in Shenzhen, China, lifts the lid on Huawei's new mobile phone and freezes in his tracks, realizing the chip inside isn't the outdated technology everyone expected, but instead is surprisingly cutting edge. Analysts stare at a microscope photo and admit China just shrank a 5-year technology gap to barely 18 months. The news immediately blows up all over tech blogs and social media across Asia. While halfway around the world, a junior US technology analyst named Maya Torres jolts awake at 2 a.m. as her phone explodes with 37 text messages. She pours instant coffee, opens a blank slide deck on her laptop, and types the title to her first page. How did China catch TSMC? Because Taiwan's tech dominance, an advantage that once looked as big as the Grand Canyon, now appeared to be smaller than a crack in the sidewalk. And this chip wasn't made by just anyone either. No, it was created by the one company that makes US government officials blood run cold: SMIC, China's semiconductor champion, and the only company on Earth even attempting to challenge TSMC's throne. No one believed that China could make chips this advanced without specialized manufacturing equipment out of the Netherlands, machines that would never reach Chinese factories due to America's trade restrictions. So how did TSMC's closest rival pull this off, and inch ever closer to TSMC itself, without the tools they were supposed to need? The first rumor, shadow stockpiles. Maybe China bought older gear and tweaked it to perform tricks no one thought possible. The second theory, midnight upgrades. Repair technicians working in secret to transform older everyday equipment into cutting-edge technology. While a handful of analysts whisper something even riskier, that China might be using experimental methods that fail 90% of the time, but create just enough working chips to showcase in their new phones. Maya scrolls through leaked procurement invoices lit by her laptop's glow. Scribbling on a sticky note, shadow stockpiles, midnight mods, need proof by Monday. No one can prove which theory wins, but the real story isn't about engineering tricks. It's about money, massive amounts of it. China wasn't just catching up through clever engineering hacks. Behind this technology breakthrough lies a $40 billion government-backed investment fund, one piece of China's multi-decade plan to achieve technology independence. For Chinese leaders, the math is simple. No advanced chips means no AI dominance, no military edge, and ultimately, no future. So anything that breaks America's grip on advanced technology is on the table for them. Regardless of how it happened, the market speaks loudly. The phone's 12 million units sell out in weeks. The Chinese media calls it Chip Liberation Day. Maya clicks on viral Chinese social media clips of users chanting chip freedom in Mandarin and pastes an image of them into her briefing deck under the slide named National Pride Factor. Meanwhile, alarm bells are sounding off in US government circles. China has just produced 12 million devices with technology that they shouldn't have access to. This sudden leap forward suggests China could soon match TSMC's capabilities, not just follow in their footsteps. While tech experts dissect and analyze Huawei's new phone all over the internet, tensions build between China and Taiwan as the Chinese government realizes they may not need TSMC for much longer. Within months, Taiwanese radar screens light up as Chinese fighter jets streak across the sky. Missiles splash down in waters just off Taiwan's coast, one landing under 100 miles away from TSMC's main campus. Maya's desk phone starts to buzz.
Breaking news. Chinese missiles land inside Taiwan's safety zone.
She then switches on the news to see a rare press interview from a retired Morris Chang, who responds with his characteristic wisdom.
If that person's priority is for economic well-being, I think they will refrain from attacking.
Back in TSMC's headquarters, engineers in cleanroom gear reach another new milestone, making even more powerful chips. But outside company gates, university students practice evacuation drills. Officially, they're for earthquakes. However, everyone understands it's preparation for missile strikes. A girl being interviewed by reporters shrugs in response to a question about fears of war. Chips are Taiwan's shield, and nobody wants to break that, yet. The word yet lands heavier than the rest of the sentence. But the breakthrough of Huawei's new chip confirms what Taiwan has secretly feared for years: being trapped in the closing jaws of two hungry superpowers. A Taiwanese politician puts it bluntly in a closed-door briefing: "We're watching our silicone shield be destroyed from both sides." The danger goes far beyond mere competition. Maya's colleagues call it the TSMC hostage theory, the idea that China holds back on invading Taiwan partly because it needs the island's chip factories. Yet, if China's starting to catch TSMC's level of advanced chips despite sanctions, a troubling question looms. How soon until they match the world's best? And once China no longer needs TSMC at all, what happens next? This delicate three-country tech rivalry becomes even more complicated in 2025 when US President Donald Trump returns to power, bringing his aggressive trade policies with him. So what was TSMC's response? An unprecedented $100 billion commitment to build multiple new factories in the United States. What industry insiders quietly call a protection fee. Because when the most powerful nation on earth squeezes, even trillion-dollar monopolies give in. But financial pressure isn't the only tool in Washington, D.C.'s arsenal. Robert O'Brien, a former national security advisor in the Trump administration, has been on the record stating the U.S. and its allies are never going to let those factories fall into Chinese hands. Maya, sitting in the crowd in shock as she writes into her notebook,
"If China invades Taiwan, the US might destroy TSMC's facilities instead of letting them be captured."
While TSMC's caught in a dangerous crossfire, the world turns to its founder for wisdom. On a fall afternoon, Morris Chang, now 89 years old, appears at a tech conference in New York City. The interviewer asks whether the silicon shield still works and what the impact would be if it fails. Chang adjusts his glasses and replies,
Ultimately, I think it will be harmful to everybody, I think the world, if we all work together, maybe it will progress faster.
Chang's wisdom isn't lost on the business world. Even Warren Buffett, the world's most famous investor, abruptly sells his entire $5 billion stake in TSMC stock. When pressed for a reason why, he offers only a cryptic response about geopolitical concerns. His polite way of saying he isn't willing to risk his fortune on an island that China could target at any moment. Despite all this uncertainty, TSMC puts on a brave face publicly with a press release. It sounds calm and unfazed, until you realize TSMC has just ordered 20 more chip printing machines from the Netherlands, a purchase so massive that it breaks industry records. Because TSMC has plenty of cash to spend, and they know time might be running out. But when tech giants aren't willing to wait and hope, they're stuck scrambling for backup plans. Apple sends a team to Arizona to inspect TSMC's half-finished factory. The project manager checks the construction schedule, seeing new delays every week. As Apple's procurement lead whispers to him, our plan B might need a plan C. Meanwhile, across the country, Maya looks at two pictures as she walks into her next meeting that tells the entire story. As she lays them on the desk side by side, they reveal one satellite image of Chinese missiles flying near Taiwan, while the other is a close-up shot of China's new advanced computer chip. She knows that these two developments are changing the global power balance more than any trade policy or tariff ever could. 48 hours later, Maya stands before a Senate subcommittee, laser pointer shaking, on a red Day 90 bar. One senator mutters, "Oh sh**." Maya flips to her final slide, leaving a blunt message. No plan B. The room stays frozen. They realize a society without TSMC will trigger the end of the world as we know it. Somewhere in silence, a wall clock starts ticking in the background. Deep in a windowless war room within the US Pentagon sits a collection of the most decorated US generals, the biggest tech CEOs, and the most influential politicians, all gripping legal pads. They're all there for the same reason: to watch a giant red timer count down from 90 days. They're observing an advanced simulation exercise to understand what would happen if the world lost access to TSMC's chips. At a far end of the table, a Silicon Valley boss wipes last night's coffee from his mouth and gives a nod. Maya Torres, sitting across from him, hears the words "run it" and presses start on her laptop. She is there to explain whatever happens next at a Congress briefing in 48 hours. Day 1. Cargo ships avoid Taiwan's waters, insurance costs skyrocket overnight. As Maya's alert reads, all chip cargo stuck in port, nothing is leaving the island. Day 15. Mobile phone makers burn through their safety stock. Tech assembly lines around the world begin to stumble. Maya looks up to lock eyes with the CEO of America's biggest phone maker to see how he reacts. Day 30. An alarm is booming from the speakers at a Texas oil refinery as a man looks at a control panel flashing red. Two tiny Taiwanese chips that run the jet fuel pumps have failed. A terrified plant manager grabs his radio and shouts,
"We need to evacuate immediately! The pressure's completely gone!"
Maya copies the quote into her notes. Day 45. Detroit car factory lines stop in their tracks due to a missing $25 parking sensor chip. European and Japanese auto plants follow within a week. Most of the world is stuck with manufacturing factories with half-built vehicles. A colleague next to Maya whispers, "That's called the TSMC domino effect."
Pull one key piece and the whole tower falls.
Day 60. A heart monitor screen goes black in a New York City hospital. Nurses immediately reboot but get no result. The replacement parts are all gone, with spare pieces on a never-ending backorder. They move the man to the trauma ward and push his surgery out a month. Maya swallows hard and paste a headline under healthcare impact in her presentation. Day 70. Big tech companies yank parts from employees' laptops just to keep their busy servers alive. Major platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Google, and Netflix start to restrict hours for stability. A Senate aide asks Maya for a headline. She emails back a meme of an oil barrel turned into a computer chip. Day 75. An expert tells Congress,
"You can't build a new chip factory overnight."
Stock prices fall again. S&P 500 is down 75% since the 90-day timer started. News headlines read,
"Chips aren't the new oil, they're the new oxygen, and we don't have any left."
Day 80. Wisconsin dairy factories quit milking cows due to machinery needing replacement chips. Milk and butter can no longer be found in grocery stores. Chicken and beef are soon to follow. Maya adds food supply onto her growing red list named Industries Affected. Day 85. Assembly machines freeze mid-task at a plane factory in Georgia. No control chips, no airplanes. Supervisor radios,
"We've hit our breaking point."
people begin to receive flight cancellation notices and announcements of restrictions on flying being reserved for only strict circumstances. Maya lifts her eyes from the laptop to see these powerful men all around her with looks of horror on their faces. Day 88. The city operations manager radios the governor of Arizona yelling,
"We've got enough power to keep the city's traffic lights and phone towers running for another 2 hours. Then we're toast."
The red clock on the wall flips to 48 hours. 2 days of digital oxygen left. Maya scans the silent room. You can hear a pin drop. Deep down, she already knows how this will end. She clicks open a video on her laptop and works on her report. It's Morris Chang, now nearly 90 years old, giving a rare interview from his study.
To the world, maybe somebody will refrain from attacking it. If that person's priority is for economic well-being, I think they will refrain from attacking. If there's a war, I mean, it will be destroyed. Everything will be destroyed.